Hello and welcome to PressTV's live coverage of what has happened in Paris and France. In case you're not aware, let's review just what has happened, which is a nightmare scenario that has come true for the whole country that's in mourning right now. You have simultaneous attacks that have happened on multiple targets by these gunmen and also people who have blown up themselves working in unison. That is the nightmare scenario that has happened for Paris. As a result, you have reports that indicate at this point that up to 150 people have been killed. This, at this point, has been something that's been claimed by the Daesh terrorists. Confirmation on that is yet to come, including the number of fatalities and the injuries, which at this point is plus 200. This was operated in multiple fronts by these terrorists. At this point, 7 of those people who were deemed terrorists who launched these coordinated attacks have been what France calls neutralized, but they have been killed. The statement that was made by the French public prosecutor did not clarify whether all of the people were actually killed or not. But what is certain is that at this point, the people who executed the attacks, these terrorists, also had accomplices, possibly, and the police there are after them. But it is deemed as one of the worst acts of violence since World War II, based on some of the headlines here, which shows the depth of how severe this attack is. And of course the focus is countries like France, along with some of its allies, such as the United States and the UK, who have supported the policies that they've had on Syria, which included either directly, indirectly, or covertly the support for some of these terrorist groups. Obviously this is one of the consequences. The Charlie Hebdo attacks was just the beginning, and France to now, for the second time, to experience something of this depth and gravity on its soil. As you can see, the president has declared a state of emergency for Paris, for all of France, that is, and there are no flights going in or out of the country. Let's get a little bit more from our correspondent, Alistair Roy, who joins us from the capital, Paris. Alistair, at this point, we're looking at the fatalities that have now increased, confirming that at least a minimum of 150 have been killed. Tell us a little bit about that, and also the next question is accomplices. Are there any? What update can you give us on that?
As far as the number of people who have died, it's hovering around 120 to 150. What we are hearing is that there have been 200 people who have been injured, and of them 80 have been very badly injured. That means if they died, then the number of deaths could actually go up. That we will know over the course of time, over the coming hours. What we are also hearing is that the French government has announced a state of emergency, and that means that the borders have not really been closed, because the train services to Belgium, etc., they have not been announced as disrupted. But what we will know as the day rolls on is that how this is going to affect transport and borders of France, whether people will be able to move in or move out. Until now, the way the borders operated was that if you were traveling from Belgium or from other country, neighboring country to France, your identity would not be checked. You could just drive through as smoothly as if you were in the same country. That's the part of the European law. But under special circumstances like this, they can be revoked, and thereby everyone crossing the border will be checked and frisked. As far as the accomplices question is concerned, the government has not really, or the state prosecutors or the investigators have not really given any hint as to if there were any. But very likely these attacks have been so well coordinated that the attacks seem to be done by someone who really knew exactly the way Paris works, the neighborhoods where the attacks took place. They tend to be quite busy. The Bataclan concert hall is always very packed. Some of the biggest or most well-selling artists come and play in that concert hall. The other thing is, one of the or some of the attackers, according to French media, said this is for Syria, and they said it in French. This was not said it in Arabic or in any other language. So the attackers actually spoke French, which means that they were either locals who knew the city very well, or they were from other parts of the country, or at least they knew France to be able to speak French. And at the same time, what we're also hearing is that these attackers were quite young. So that means their accomplices could also be either quite young or of a similar age group. But all of that remains to be confirmed because authorities have not yet given any details if they have arrested any of the accomplices. What we know that the police forces killed the attackers, and apparently, according to, again, some eyewitnesses, some of them actually blew themselves up.
Okay, so the immediate question that comes to mind for many is why is France experiencing this wave of terrorist attacks? And when I say wave, I'm combining obviously what happened prior, which is the Charlie Hebdo attacks. And why is France experiencing this in the form and manner that it is, as opposed to other countries? When we look at obviously other countries who are involved either directly or indirectly supporting the war on Syria, for example, or the foreign policy to involve the Middle East and their support for these groups that are terror groups, which I'm guessing is one of the motives of these terrorists to take out revenge against countries that are involved in, for example, the war on Syria.
It's still very unclear, primarily because France, if we go by the logic of one side, which says France did support in the creation of these groups, then why would they attack France? Because the aim of these groups is to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, which is officially the position of the French government as well. At least the French government doesn't want to see Mr. Bashar al-Assad in power any longer, or at least during the talks. The counterpoint is that these groups have actually become targets of French defense forces operating in Syria. As far as the latest participation of France goes, the main intention is to actually kill the French nationals. There are over 500 of them currently involved in the fight on behalf of Daesh. So the main intention is to kill those French nationals. Now, in recent weeks, France intervened in Syria with its air force, and it managed to kill some of them. Whether this is a tit for tat, it's not yet to be confirmed. But what it appears is that each time these attacks have taken place, the blame is put on the French government, saying you intervened in Syria. However, at the same time, there is one side of the story which says these attackers were actually raised or supported by support from France to its main allies, that is Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And therefore, it's still not very exactly clear as to why they are attacking in France, but the main intention, it seems like, is to spread a feeling of terror and to take some sort of revenge for whatever action France is taking in Syria.
Very well, thank you for that. We appreciate that. It's Anas Saproy, correspondent, talking to us there. From the capital, Paris, let's bring in from Brisbane, Max Igan, radio host and political commentator. Max Igan, this was obviously a shock to many around the world. When you heard the news, what was your reaction, given the fact that France, again, is experiencing terrorist attacks of this depth?
Well, I actually expected some terror attacks to be staged somewhere around Europe, and France is really an obvious target. I can't help thinking back to a conversation that Benjamin Netanyahu had a few months ago when France recognised Palestine as a state, when he said that things would go very bad for France because they'd done that. A week later, we saw the Charlie Hebdo attack, and now we see this attack in France. And I think a lot of the reason France has been targeted in this attack is because it creates the impression that these terrorists can just attack anyone, anywhere around the world, that nobody's safe. And because France is also, it's a major tourist destination. Everybody loves Paris, you know, the Eiffel Tower, all that sort of stuff. So it brings it home to everybody around the world, and it raises the ire of the world. And I think this event will be used to escalate tension in the Middle East and to escalate the depth and spread of the war in the Middle East. And it will also be used to curtail any help that we may be giving to refugees or any aid that we're sending into the area. Actually, a few months ago, I said this was going to happen. They would stage terror attacks. They would use them to escalate the conflict and to destroy any Western sympathy for any of the people who may be suffering in these conflicts. I mean, I can't help look at this event and think that this plays directly into the hands of the conflict. I mean, just as we see Russia coming in and wiping out what is essentially the West's pet army, which is what ISIS is. I mean, let's face it, that's what it is. This is a Western rebel group that's been created to go in and undermine Syria, that's basically just spread out throughout the entire region, as was predicted it would do. And all of the evidence indicates that this is being run and financed by the West anyway. So even if these are IS so-called terrorists in France that have carried out this attack, we've got to look at who's financing these people. And the finance for these people is coming from Wall Street, it's coming from Tel Aviv, it's coming from Brussels, it's coming from all the places it shouldn't be coming from. There's a wider picture going on here, and I think this is going to be used to escalate and justify the conflict in Syria and the wider region around Syria. And also, you've got to understand, France has always been very outspoken against the state of Israel. You've got a strong Muslim population in France. They've always been very supportive of the Palestinian people, and this will turn the people against the Arab world, the Muslim world. The Western media is very, very careful to drop the word. This has been carried out by Islamists in almost every second sentence that I'm hearing. They're not saying terrorists, they're not saying ISIS, they're not saying anything like that, they're saying Islamists or jihadists. They're making sure that the attention is turned towards Islam. And that's what this is being used for, to justify an escalation of the attacks in the Middle East. I don't know whether this was ISIS or what, whether it's just some kids that have been brainwashed to go and do this stuff. You know, it's easy to do that with young extremists, to get them to march to the drum you want them to march to. But we've got to look back and see who is really controlling this and who is really influencing these people. And I think it's all coming from the West. And I think this is a staged event. And I think it's very predictable.
Well, you covered a number of topics there. Let's get a reaction from Edward Corrigan. He joins us in this conversation. He's a human rights activist who joins us from Ontario. Edward Corrigan, I don't know if you heard Max Igan, but the part that's very amazing about this whole thing is the fact that security officials in France and experts there had predicted that there would be an unprecedented attack that was in the offing and would be impossible to thwart. And then looking deeper, you can see other countries such as the UK and other countries around the world who are one way or another involved in this war to have the same kind of assessment from the security officials. So why are these countries continuing with their policies when it comes to Syria? Again, we don't know if that's the case or not, but based on what we're reading and hearing, that this would be the probable reason for the attacks that have taken place.
Well, first of all, I would say that I hope that the people who financed and organized this attack are all brought to justice and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. It's strange, but not unusual, that all the perpetrators of these attacks happen to be dead. Therefore, you can't question them and see who actually is behind it. That is unfortunately a little too convenient for me. It's possible this is blowback from recent attacks from France and the United States on so-called Islamic forces, but the priority for the French government and for the American government is not ISIS or fighting the Islamic State or the Caliphate. It's actually regime change in Syria. And of course, now the Americans are bombing the oil fields, some of which are controlled by Islamic groups, but some of which are controlled by the government. The net effect is you're going to do a lot of damage to Syrian infrastructure and set back the country, a huge amount, for basically displaying some independence and, of course, being allied with their Russian allies and not turning. But you really have to look at who benefits from this. There's a number of things that are interesting. One is that this is recently the European Union, for example, just decided to label products from the West Bank as from the illegal Jewish settlements, and that caused a lot of consternation in Israel. They were claiming this as anti-Semitic, but if this attack now is going to certainly be utilized as an assault on Muslims against the Palestinians and to further expand the Western war on terror, which of course ends up destroying Middle Eastern countries and bringing, occupying them and resulting in, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of deaths. Now, the same thing happened in 9/11, where there was an attack, terrible, almost 3,000 people died, and they used it as a justification for an invasion of Afghanistan, an invasion of Iraq. Again, 1 million people died in Iraq. But of course, while this was a justification for the war on terror, of course, Afghanistan, the state, had nothing to do with it. Iraq had nothing to do with it. This is all admitted. It was all about oil. But at the time, it was used to basically to amplify the drumbeats for war of certain groups that wanted to go in and either build a pipeline from the Caspian Sea through Afghanistan so they could exploit the gas fields there, or go in and seize the oil from Iran. So again, always look at who benefits. That doesn't mean that this isn't some Islamic group of crazies. But there's a historical precedent. There was Operation Gladio, which was an organization of I guess, of terrorism that was set up by NATO and various European governments. But what it was they would launch attacks and kill many people. There's a whole series of attacks, even murders of prominent politicians. But this was blamed on the communists. And this affected the political situation. So there was a backlash against socialist and leftist parties, and it was manipulated by right-wingers who, of course, wanted to condemn the left. But actually, this program was developed and organized and controlled by NATO and right-wing forces, and they killed many, many people. And of course, it was used to manipulate politics in Europe. I think you could say that there's almost a parallel here, where you have so-called Muslims attacking, in a sort of, a crazy attack, but it's going to create such a big backlash against the large Muslim population in France. They're using it as a crackdown. They're going to have a massive security screening and cow them. And this also, France and even the United States is talking about, bombing countries and striking out to attack their enemies. They need to identify who the enemies are. If they just start bombing randomly or blindly, it's just going to have a massive escalation. But of course, now we've got Russian troops and Russian fighters and Russian missiles in Syria. And if the French and the Americans start to attack Syria, blaming them for the attack, much like what happened in 9/11, of course, this could lead to a massive escalation of conflict, clashes with the Russians, and in fact, ultimately to World War III. So there are a lot of people that are out there that are trying to manipulate these events. It also could be used, this is going to put a lot of pressure on the refugees fleeing the war-torn areas of the Middle East, and will justify governments trying to control them, block them, even using violence to control them. And this is also, I think, maybe the intended outcome of this particular attack.
Well, I don't know, Max. Again, your assessment is obviously what's important here, but it takes 2 and 2 to figure this whole thing out. Based on some analysts out there and some experts who are saying that this is a direct blowback of what has happened, and you're still in the midst of a political push after you have the Russian air power come in for the past 6 weeks. Conducted probably thousands of sorties eliminating many of these terrorists, that this is a sign that there should not be this engagement, as we see still from the U.S., for example, who has said that they're going to support these moderate elements that are out on the ground, which for them is still hard to even identify and distinguish, which has brought Russia saying, let's find out who these terrorists are, which ones you support or not. Do you think this is going to open their eyes or ring some kind of a reality check that we should stop with this support and move on with the political process?
And I concur with everything that the previous guest said. I mean, this is absolutely true. And it is very likely this is just a group of radical extremists that have been radicalised to do this, But you've got to look at who radicalised them. And what this is going to be, this is going to be a massive push to rally the troops, to escalate the conflict. That's what it's going to be, when it should be the opposite. I mean, the conflict itself is utterly contrived. There is no civil war in Syria. What there is a foreign invasion that's been going on in Syria since day one. They tried to do it from the beginning, but the world rallied and wouldn't let them, so they created ISIS and did it covertly. That's what all this is about. And this will be used. I mean, the timing of this has been impeccable, because just as we see Russia come in here and obliterate, like I said, what is essentially the West pet army, now they want to rally the troops to go in and protect them and go in there and overthrow Assad's government. They have no idea what they're going to replace it with. They just want to overthrow it and leave the place a complete shambles the way they leave everywhere else they touch. It's all about destabilising the area. And when I look at this attack, I mean, you've got to say, who benefits? Cui bono? Who are the ones who benefit from this attack? This is going to rally the entire world against Muslims, against Islam, and it's going to be used to escalate the conflict in the Middle East. You're going to have people in the suburbs in Australia and in New Zealand and in Argentina, all sorts of countries that aren't even involved, suddenly hating the Muslims because of what they've done to Paris, their favourite city. I mean, this seems to be so contrived. This has obviously been done by someone who wants to escalate the conflict and who has a grudge against Muslims. And you've got to ask yourself who that is. And when I look at how ISIS is being funded and run, I mean, maybe I'm conspiratorial, but all eyes to me point to Israel. They really do, because that's what I see. That's who I see benefiting from this whole destabilisation process that's going on in the Middle East, this whole war for Greater Israel that we're seeing. That's where I see all of this going. I think this has been staged. I think it's a setup. I really do.
So where to go from here, Edward Corrigan? Are we looking at the timing being a significant point regarding the fact that you have had advances that are made, and it's not just Russia, it's the Syrian army also on the ground with Iran in the advisory role that are eliminating these terrorists, such as the most recent development coming in Aleppo. Do you think this is going to make the U.S. and its allies and regional powers rethink their strategy or accelerate their strategy?
Well, there's going to be a large political pressure for some sort of revenge, much like after 9/11. Now, you understand that there are American troops on the ground. The Americans announced they're sending in 50 special forces for training purposes. I've had reports, eyewitnesses about British and American troops in Syria long before this, but we were seeing, a lot of talk of American troops on the ground. We're talking about the Turks and other people want to impose a no-fly zone over a sovereign country. And their American fighters have been stationed in Turkey, which are not there to attack ISIS or anybody else, but there to fight, Russian Air Force, which is also in the area. So you see a massive intervention, but you see this as a cover. It's very easy to mobilize public opinion, especially after a horrible incident like this, and against Muslims, but it becomes a cover for an attack on the infrastructure of Syria. For example, the Americans, a little over a week ago, bombed 2 electric plants in Aleppo, and what they have to do with ISIS, this was an attack on this infrastructure for Syria. So any country that steps out of line, doesn't do what the Americans will do, is going to be punished and punished severely. So now you have, of course, the Russian airliner that was shot down. The Russians massively escalated their attacks against the Islamic groups and the rebels opposing the government, and now have extended their attack. They eliminated, many of their opponents of the Syrian government. You also had a recent attack in Beirut, which was in the heart of the Shia area, and then you get it whipped up, and the people said that they were Palestinians, and there was a lot of angry Shias that want to attack the Palestinian refugee camps. But again, you look at who benefits. What's the point of doing this? Who is trying to get the Syrians or the Lebanese Shia and the Sunni to fight amongst each other, and
right.
Of course to have an attack on Palestinians, which probably had nothing to do with it at all.
Very well. We're going to unfortunately have to end it there. Let me thank Max Igan, radio host and political commentator there from Brisbane. You were just listening to Edward Corrigan. He's a human rights activist who was speaking to us from Ontario. We're going to have more rolling coverage after the international news, which is coming up in about 4 minutes' time with Daniel Arya. Do stay with us for that. That's bye-bye for now.